It's the 18th of July. June and July. Get it? July 2022. Welcome, everybody. 2011, you had a massive earthquake that dominated the media and the tsunami. Footage from that 700 kilometer per hour multiple waves crashing into communities and cities and coastlines for 680 kilometers was an incredible couple of months of footage. In 2011, U.S. forces killed Al-Qaeda. Then they took his body out to sea and threw it overboard so nobody can see it. Brilliant move there, weirdos. Egyptian President Mubarak quit and then ended up going into a coma for while he was in a prisoner for war crimes. The president of Tanzania, Ben Ali, fled. This is all media moments. Libya, former President Muammar Gaddafi. So Gaddafi, Ben Ali, and Mubarak and Al-Qaeda, Osama bin Laden, were known assets of the Central Intelligence Agencies and the military-industrial complex. Gaddafi, they stuck a stick up his, after they used a pocket knife to make it big enough, and that was streamed live, and he was alive when they were doing it. That took up the media, and Prince William, the weird friggin' Crown Royal stuff, took over the media for 6 weeks. The English riots hit, of course, to celebrate austerity and the major wedding. You had Steve Jobs died from Apple, emaciated from cancer. They murdered him, eh? The death of North Korea leader Kim Jong-il. And if anybody remember that, you remember the videos of entire communities screaming and crying. At the same time, they had multiple nuclear meltdowns, but that never really got much traction because you had all kinds of long-term U.S. assets being killed. You had royalty that demanded their face in all the media for several weeks. Steve Jobs. I had made a video about Steve Jobs when he died. Never got a single view. I had like 20,000 subscribers at the time. 100% censorship 11 years ago was quite possible, obviously. We counted the tanks at Fukushima 750. If you include several hundred small ones. They had 1,000 tanks in 2013 and 1,000 tanks in 2022. How many tanks did they build in that 9 years? IAEA minute on June the 2nd, 2011. There is no such thing as a safe level of man-made anthropogenic radiation. That the radiation standards the International Atomic Energy Agency is using is based on bananas and potato chips and walking in sunshine, not nuclear reactors or nuclear waste or nuclear weapons. The ultimate in betrayal. This model of Fukushima radioactive fallout is a 40-day model. I'm going to speed it up 100%. This is 40 days of radioactive fallout. Of course, the radiation doesn't stop at 40 days, and the plume never stopped coming out of there. The plume covering half the planet in the first 40 days. This is Noah, so Noah's going to downplay the living daylights out of it. but it hopefully gives you context. So you expect all the animals and insects and birds and, humans that are in that continuous plume to have up to 1,800 illnesses affect them. There's a story we're going to cover, the second story coming up, is nuclear watchdog nonprofit C-10. Efforts to ease Seabrook Nuclear Power Station's false alarm confusion. This is supposed to be a nonprofit. From what we've seen with all nonprofits when it comes to nuclear, they're controlled opposition created by the industry, so people like me and you can't exist, right? And they're out there, they've taken it upon themselves to yell at anybody who's worried about Seabrook. Shut up! It's okay! We're paying attention! Go back to your pitiful lives. And remember, the watchdogs here in Canada sat in silence as Canada lifted all restrictions on June the 14th, 2011 from the entire country of Japan. So 55 countries banned food from 14 prefectures. Canada lifted all restrictions, which meant that the Canadian supermarkets now were poison factories for radiation. The entire country, Canada, has been poisoned constantly now for 11 years, and you can see that in the health. In Japan, by 2012, there was an extra 865,000 cancers. Cancer is just one of 1,800 illnesses and diseases, not immune deficiencies and injuries, that'll manifest. It's usually the last one, not always the case, but it's considered latent. But because you fill the supermarkets up in Canada with radioactive food from a nuclear wasteland nobody else would take, diseases have exploded in Canada. This story is really interesting for 2013. This was a Freedom of Information Act application. The NRC was saying Libya war news should now downgrade the Fukushima news cycle. There's a lot of terrible things you can infer from that, and they're all right, unfortunately. Nuclear reactors are most certainly not clean and not zero emission. All nuclear power plants need 2 external power plants dedicated to them. These are like huge, are like little cities. Even if the world does opt for nuclear power, fossil fuel will be the major source of energy for decades. So I doubt climate change activists have any idea of how much the world would need to change in order to meet the net zero targets in any near term. Countries that back renewables over nuclear power cut more CO2 emissions. Pursuing nuclear power failed to do so, researchers have found. Nuclear power should not be considered an effective low-carbon energy source. Take that. Nuclear power hinders the fight against climate change. Countries investing in renewables are achieving carbon reductions far faster than those which opted to back dirty nuclear power. Renewable energy provides low carbon emissions compared to nuclear energy. The Canadian media, nuclear has fewer emissions than other sources of power. Think again. What they fail to mention is that the waste is still splitting the atoms. The significance of that should be terrifying to anybody that understands we need insects and animals and humans on the planet. It is not true that nuclear produces no carbon emissions once it's in operations. Let me remind you All nuclear power plant needs 2 external power plants to run every second and for 60 years after the decommissioning. The problem is not just the highly dangerous waste itself, but the fact that dealing with the waste would necessarily involve enormous amounts of machine-handled waste packaging, transportation, constructions, maintenance. Each would produce significant carbon emission. The fuel pools at these nuclear sites are still splitting the same atoms they would to power millions of homes, but the atoms are released directly into the environment with no containment. It's the worst case scenario imaginable. Nuclear power is helping to drive the climate crisis on top of that from resources. Nuclear power, apart from destroying biodiversity throughout its life cycle, produces up to 37 times the CO2 emissions of renewable energy sources. 37 times the CO2 emissions. So if you're thinking of CO2 as an issue, then nuclear is a crappy option. Scientists, nuclear energy is a waste of time. Unless you're a genocidal maniac, then nuclear is perfect, isn't it? This is a 20-day radioactive fallout projection. It was much more severe, unfortunately, than that one. That's just 20 days. Gas, oil, and coal emissions don't create plumes like this, by the way. They don't even create 50-mile plumes. Nuclear is the only thing that can kill a planet. Gas, oil, and coal emissions don't pulse energy every second for millions of years. Nuclear is the only one that has that unique, wicked, horrific distinction. Looks like we got a bit of censorship tonight, do we? Got 10 people on a show we've been doing for a decade, 9 likes and 12 votes. Should nuclear power plants be labeled as biological weapons of mass destruction? This is a no-brainer. Unless another prime minister or president was shot, then it's hard to conceive why there's only 11 people on my show tonight. Hi, everybody. Hope everybody's doing good. So last night the video was 1 hour 54 minutes 17 seconds, and 12 hours later it changed. Every day 12 hours later the video will change. Now it was 1 hour 54 minutes and 26 seconds. So the video from last night gained an extra 9 seconds 12 hours later. Most of my videos, or not most, all of my videos would get at least 6 seconds longer 12 hours after the video is over. Once the video ends, exactly 12 hours later, the number changes. You can't download the video for 12 hours. The live stream comments will disappear for the same 12 hours. The video won't show up on the front page for 12 hours. You have to go, you see where I see uploads, go to past live streams, then you can find the most recent live stream. It takes 12 hours before it shows up on the page. None of my videos will show up in the sidebar alongside of my videos. And that's not 12 hours. That's forever. It doesn't show up there. They're bored out of their mind and got nobody to pick on. And the little demons have to go pick on somebody, so... whenever you see a story from the world nuclear news, it's like Fox News on steroids when it comes to evil. World nuclear news never puts anybody's name on the story on top of this. It's, if you look it up, it's actually a pro-nuclear lobbying group. It's not world nuclear news, it's the world evil Central Zero. The auction's helping to recycle old nuclear power plants. 90% of a nuclear power plant is bombarded with neutrons. It becomes very brittle. It's known as a Wigner effect also. But it means the material is radioactive. And a company has seen for the first time in the United Kingdom apparently a way to make a few bucks. Decommissioning nuclear power plants can take many years, up to 60 to up to 100 years, 300 years for done already. Decommissioning nuclear plants can take many years. It's typically supposed to be 60 years, unless it's Chris Singh with Entergy. He claims he can do it in 20 years, unless by dumping it everywhere, obviously. Can take many years, involve complex safety. There is no safety when it comes to decommissioning. These are filthy animals. Well, animals are awesome, actually, compared to these creatures. These are weirdos. That's the only way to describe nuclear industry is a bunch of weirdos trying to exterminate the planet. But one firm is doing its best to minimize nuclear waste by cleaning up old kit and selling, this is the strangest words, the pre-loved items at auctions. Pre-loved. There's nothing at a nuclear power plant that is loved or lovable. There's nothing. There's literally nothing. Excuse me, I got a cup of tea, container of ice water, trying to keep the whistle from breaking down here. Somebody voted no. What the hell am I pulling? You're not very nice. Pre-loved items at auctions. Look at the Land Rovers. They use the Land Rovers to spread salt on the roads in the winter. Land Rovers. Very, very expensive Land Rovers. You can see how crazy this industry actually is, that they went and bought Land Rovers to drive around the nuclear site, the massive shit-for-brain nuclear site. Ramco, which works with the UK Ministry of Defence, is military-industrial complex, in other words, has teamed up with Magnox, which is also the military-industrial complex, and the Nuclear Decommissioning Authority, which is, this is unbelievable, laughable to call United Kingdom's gatekeepers a nuclear decommissioning authority. You can't be an authority in something you've never done, for starters. To sell off surplus assets from nuclear power plants. Large-scale industrial sites, aka nuclear power plants, are almost like small villages and in their own right as they are decommissioned. Yeah, they bring in a lot of transient workers because no one is paying attention to them when they get sick and die a few weeks later. For instance, Ramco's head of operations, shit for brains, Adrian Foreman, So they auctioned 60 lorry loads of radioactive equipment from Bradwell nuclear site in the UK. 60 transport trucks of radioactive material was put back into circulation. It's despicable, really. Scamco has found a market and value for things like 120 tons of scaffolding. That should just make you cringe. It's common knowledge that scaffolding at these sites is incredibly radioactive. As Foreman says, in size, the reactor's more like cathedrals. Really, you're going to equate dirty disease factories and nuclear power plants as cathedrals? Such scum. They know no bounds. And so there needed an awful lot of scaffolding. They bring in awful lot of transient workers to work on those radioactive projects. No health care for them. Other items include food defense barriers and pumps and generators used to tow salt. Their Land Rover Defenders were used to tow salt spreaders to keep the site safe, as they put it, during winter weather. Really, you're the only place that needs salt spreaders in the winter, are you? In the past, most of that stuff would have got thrown away in a nuclear site and sent to scrap. You can't reuse by rights anything from a nuclear site. It's disgusting. Just the whole story is so disgusting. We take away the stress for... Really, you think this industry has stress? You really think that these people give a shit about anything on the planet? Whoever wrote the story is disgusting. At the moment, supply chain difficulties, for example, have meant that some of the catering radioactive equipment, like the combi ovens from supposed to be no longer needed, canteens, are popular. Yeah, radiate everybody. All the material that is provided them for resale or checking first has to go through testing by the nuclear site staff. Like the very last people you can trust is the nuclear staff at a nuclear power plant. They're the very last people I would be trusting. You literally got to be stupid to trust these people. Says Foreman, whose company also has radiation testing expertise and licenses. They work with the military complex, for God's sakes. They're the last people can be trusted. And there's no reason, this is the first time they've done this because it's radioactive. Or they would have done, if it wasn't radioactive, they would have done it all the time. There are some people that have the wrong idea about safety issues. Yeah, the people that are working these jobs in particular, they're insane. From watching things like Chornobyl, there are a lot of people from watching things like Chornobyl. There's a lot of people like me that are interested in the science. You sack of shit. You disgusting parasite. Get down and give me 50. And the nuclear industry. The goblin machine itself. A.K.A. the nuclear industry. Nothing but a bunch of puppy rapists. With the forthcoming increase in decommissioning activity in the UK, I'll believe it when I see it. There's no evidence the United Kingdom is capable of decommissioning a toothpick. There's no evidence to support those assertions. There's nothing. Why don't you get out and decommission the rest of the planet while you're at it, big shots? This model here is 19 days of radioactive fallout, this bottom corner. Doesn't that make you all warm inside? Make you all warm and fuzzy? Let's keep her rolling. Ah, yes, Seabrook. This story should freak you right out. Seabrook had a radiological release for sure. And we got more stories coming up later that help quantify those assertions. But this story from the day cracks me up. Non-profit nuclear watchdog. A nuclear watchdog. Quoted by the mainstream media on top of that. Is not going to be a nuclear watchdog, okay? They're the controlled opposition. They're the last one you're going to be trusting. And he probably hired a few useful idiots that come across as normal, but they're the furthest thing from normal people. Efforts to ease Seabrook Nuclear Power Station false alarm confusion. I read the headline and I said, oh crap, don't tell me that a non-profit watchdog group is coming out and picking up for a nuclear power plant. You stop picking on the nuclear power plant. It's been 5 days since the Seabrook Nuclear Power Station had an alarm and a warning on loudspeakers, 9 of them, out of the 121 they got in a 10-mile radius. It wasn't a pre-recorded message either. It was a person in real time who was... You can hear their voices, and they were physically shook. They were stuttering the whole 9 yards. And the people got the warning, didn't know what to do. They completely failed. The system is so dysfunctional, the entire communities, something like 25 communities in a 10-mile radius, didn't know what to do. Had no idea what to do. Oh, there's a siren at the nuclear plant. What am I supposed to do? I don't know. And the nuclear watchdog nonprofit is looking to diminish the confusion if a similar incident ever happens again. That's not their job at all. At all. Their job is not to come out and defend a nuclear power plant. What the hell are we reading here? They screwed up big time. Helping ease the confusion of the Seabrook Station false alarm was Massachusetts-based radiological monitoring network C-10. C-10. Geez, you must have had a lot of sleepless nights trying to come up with that name. This is why I don't keep sharp objects around me, because I wouldn't have an eyeball left on my head. Which confirmed there was no gamma or beta. What about alpha and neutrons? Radiation in the air on July the 12th. Which confirmed. I've never heard a story like this before. I've never heard a story that... I never even heard a rumor like this before. This is the strangest story imaginable. C-10, which confirmed there was no gamma or beta, so leave the nuclear power plant alone. Stop picking on them. We were busy confirming with concerned citizens who called us, emailed us, and posted on their social media. You get how that works? The controlled opposition is where everybody ran to. That is just despicable. That is incredibly despicable. That our monitors were in fact reading normal safe levels that day. Like, first off, there is no safe levels. Second off, the fuel pools are hemorrhaging out of these places all day, every day. How come your monitors don't find that? Specifically, exactly how come? You disgusting weasels. You despicable weasels. Unbelievable weasels disguised as a non-profit watchdog and then quoted by the media. It did not take long for the group to officially confirm there was no gamma in the air. How about the water? That's immediate. Our monitoring network is real time, Abramson says. Hang for it. There's lots of protocol in place to alert people if there's an impending emergency. First off, there's a whole protocol before the sirens can go off and there's an announcement. There's a huge chain of command. There's no such thing as a single person flicking a switch. A whole lot of people had to sign off on it. If it was a normal test, it would have been all the sirens. There's steps, instructions, what to do if the alarm was real, but since it was an accident, nobody knew what to do. This has never happened before. Well, first off, there's zero possibility they're going to use the sirens in a real emergency. And there's been a few occasions when they did, and then it was downplayed as an accident. Now, C-10, probably the stupidest name in the history of a company. They're supposed to be a non-profit nuclear watchdog, and they're going to name their company C-10. Instead of calling themselves nuclear watchdog or something descriptive so everybody can figure it out. If somebody says to you, I work for a company called C-10, you're going to say, what the frig is a C-10, for God's sakes? Is it a butt plug? What is it? Now C-10, a non-profit watchdog, wants to look into how people reacted to the false alarm and make sure they know what to do if it actually happens in the future. We're hearing a lot of people were sort of frozen in place with indecisions. They were confused on what to do next and didn't really follow the instructions. And she's a Valley girl. She's the watchdog for C-10. I got more confidence into my toenails than I do to her. Zero confidence in her. Zilch. Sarah, C-10 Executive Director. When I was listening to it, I was like, what the hell are they doing down there? Oh, that's right, it's controlled opposition. Who knows nothing about nothing. And in the mainstream media interviewing, the chances of the mainstream media interviewing me are zero, zilch, nothing. Because I'm honest and I'm paying attention. I know what's going down. They're being interviewed because that's controlled opposition. Nuclear watchdog non-profit. Reports efforts to ease the false alarm confusion. That's a complete discrepancy in what she was saying, isn't it? They got 121 of these sirens. Oh, if you want to get into even more confusing, meet Jennifer, Homeland Security Advisor. The Homeland Security got their badges from administration, not legislation. They're not entitled to law enforcement benefits or law enforcement medical. They were typically hired from advertisement on coffee cups and pizza boxes. They got the credibility of a homeless person. And actually, a homeless person got more credibility than them. If you live within 100 miles of this place, the right thing to do is sell and get the frig out of there. They're going to be killing people in the near future, this group. They had it released there, and there's more evidence coming up later. Greenpeace radiation investigation at Chornobyl. Greenpeace, which is 100% controlled opposition. to assess the accuracy of a corporation known as IAEA. It's a subsidy of another corporation known as United Nations, which is 195 militaries. There's nothing good about this organization whatsoever. Near the ruins of the Chornobyl nuclear power plant, an international team of scumbags led by Scumbag Greenpeace is examining abandoned Russian positions for radioactive contamination. Trenches and dugouts were built by Russian conscripts during the occupation of the Chornobyl site in March. Well, they occupied Chornobyl because they knew the militaries wouldn't fire weapons at them in a nuclear meltdown zone. About 600 soldiers were deployed. The research project is being conducted with approval from the Ukraine government. Do you think the Ukraine government would approve me to go down there? And his cooperation with scientists from the state agency of Ukraine. So you got the Ukraine government and the state agency of Ukraine working with them. It's absurd to suggest that they're independent. It's actually a crime to suggest that they're independent. For the first time since the beginning of the Russians' invasion, independent measurements will be taken. That's not independent measurements. They're in cahoots with the actual government. How can you call that independence? What kind of friggin' voodoo greenwashing is that? The April 28th statement of the sadistic International Atomic Energy Agency will be assessed. According to the sadistic International Atomic Non-Energy Agency, while there was increased radiation, the levels did not pose a great danger to the environment or the people. I showed you the headlines earlier. There is no safe level of radiations from the same group, right? And their standards are based on natural, not man-made. Did anybody forget that this quick? The kooky, sadistic, sadist of International Atomic Energy Agency Deputy Director is a long-time employee of Russia's nuclear company, the government company, Rosatom. So, they're the farthest thing from independent. They're controlled opposition again. You have no organizations will be accepted into the fold that are honest. That's suicide for the nuclear industry. That's absolutely suicide for the nuke-tard industry. Sean Bunny, a nuclear expert from Greenpeace. Now, we've covered this sack of shit 15, 20 times. A lot of the times, that's the guy they'll quote. Is useful idiot, Sean Bunny. He's a degenerate. He says between 7 and 9 tons of nuclear fuel were pulverized and ejected into the atmosphere in the 1986 explosion. Between 7 and 9 tons. Well, Fukushima reactors were 720 tons. Each of them. And they had fuel pools with decades of those reactor cores in them. And there was 2 of them at the top of each of the reactor buildings. Hang on, wait for it. So this was reactor 4. That reactor was 720 tons, not 7 to 9 tons. 720 tons. The fuel pools had decades of the reactor cores, the 2 fuel pools. They're gone too, as you can see over there. Gone as in burnt and covered the planet in radioactive fallout. Reactor 3 Reactor 4 and 3 are easy to look at and say they lost their fuel pools, decades of reactor cores, and their 720-ton reactor. You have to be in denial not to comprehend that. Compared to Chernobyl, it was 7 and 9 tons. Each reactor at Japan is 720 tons. There's 2 more reactors that lost their reactor cores and the fuel pools, reactor 1 and 2. We assume from new evidence last year that the common spent fuel pool is gone, and also reactor 6. The IAEA gave it the all clear in the end of April and said there was no extra radiation released from Russia's invasion. The nuclear agency has a mandate to promote nuclear power plants. They're actually demons, just like Greenpeace. While the European Commission actively supports nuclear power by including it in its taxonomy, it's more important ever to investigate the environmental impacts of Chernobyl, which was 7 and 9 tons versus multiple reactors in Japan that were each 720 tons and lost their entire inventories. And Chernobyl was brutal on top of that, don't get me wrong. But it ain't no Fukushima. So Sean Bunny from Greenpeace says Chernobyl is the world's worst nuclear disaster. So how can you ever trust this guy? You can trust him lied to everybody, and in a powerful corporation, controlled opposition, anti-nuclear, which is a controlled opposition known as Greenpeace. That's a lethal combination to have a perpetual liar like Sean Bunny. It's humiliating that people like that actually exist on our planet on top of that. And Greenpeace, there's 2 stories there about where Greenpeace scaled structures to protest advertisement for fossil fuel. They didn't protest Canada importing endless nuclear food from a nuclear wasteland. No. Swiss nuclear power plant reduces output to protect the fish during a heat wave. This is only after 3 days of consistent high temperatures. And what's really interesting about this, that's an artificial island for starters. It's a very small river, as you can see. It's located deep inside Europe in Switzerland. So that radioactive water has to run a long way. It's surrounded by farms in the hills. It was not built with cooling towers, but relies on pure water, fresh water, to control the temperature, which is a really unusual design. So, it uses a lot more water. The water is a higher temperature. Look at all the communities in the background. Doesn't end there. On the big shot I found, you can see all the communities just within a mile and a half of these genocide factories. Switzerland produces 30% of its electricity from 3 nuclear plants. The government decided after Fukushima to phase out nuclear power. An initial idea was to stop nuclear power by 2034. There's another bizarre story. Canada's oil sands are looking into the use of nuclear power as net zero changes everything. Net zero. Whoever wrote that story got to lay off the crack in the morning. Well, Canadian oil sands looking to the use of nuclear power as net zero changes everything. Net zero, which is Miles Allen's paper, right? Was taken over by anti-human United Nations, and now is used to bludgeon 8 million species. The pressing global need to slash emissions in the face of a growing climate crisis is driving renewed interest in nuclear power, and few places more southern in Canada's oil sands. First off, the small modular reactors they're talking about don't exist. So you got to develop them. So why not develop, geothermal and wind and solar and compressed air storage or pumped hydro storage? But the best one is compressed air storage. Why not put the money into something like that? You're going to have to develop something. Why put it into a pipeline, a pipe dream of nuclear? Because the nuclear industry has been strangling Canada for about 60 years, to the point where Canada can't go to a supermarket without eating food from Fukushima. That's why we should bring the death penalty back to Canada, so we can get rid of these people. Without a doubt, the oil sands is the biggest market for small modular reactors in Canada, says Creepo John Gorman, the president and chief executive. He's stepping down, isn't he, of the Canadian Nuclear Association. Another one bites the dust. He's going to retire and rape puppies, I guess, for the rest of his life. It's something that some companies are actively looking into. For something that don't, they're actively looking into something that don't exist. Then these people should be obviously fired. That company, if you're investing in that company, you're going to lose your money. That company doesn't have your best or their best interest at heart. It's been taken over by the nuclear industry. So small modular reactors are smaller than traditional reactors, are scalable and designed to be built economically in factories. They don't exist. They don't even exist, for God's sakes. They barely exist on paper. It's at least 40 years away from coming to fruition. The international human-hating International Atomic Energy Agency estimates that nearly 100 small reactors could be operating around the world by 2030. This is an absurd suggestion. You don't even have one. You got to build a pilot project. You got to get the kinks out of it. Then you got to come up with a new design. It's got to pass all the 10-year passing inspections. Oh, we're missing the headlines for this story, all right? What else is new around here? This story, unfortunately, is missing its headline, so it's probably confusing for people. A couple of good points, though, when it comes to these. This was funding to the Nuclear Energy University Partnership Program, right? And the story is below, but it's the only one there with a university in the name of the story. Determine the distributions of neutron in a reactor is critical to understanding the energy output, including how to ramp it up and how to shut it down. Really, after 75 years, you still don't know? So they're going to bring up an old theoretical theory and reboot it. Right. Argonne National Laboratory, Oak Ridge National Laboratory, the Naval Nuclear Laboratories, the Idaho National Laboratory, the University of Wisconsin, and the Electric Power Research Institute, and engineering firm NPR. These are basically misery machines. These are disease factories, production organizations. These are the enemies of humanity. And the university is the schools of mass destruction, obviously. So they're talking about how lead a study of how radiation damage evolves through creep, which is another word for Wigner effect, I would imagine, which can shorten the lifespan of a nuclear power plant by potentially affecting all components of a nuclear reactor core. Yeah, that's brittle. That's neutron bombardments, as we call it, or the Wigner effect. You can't change Wigner effect. But that's the industry. It'll do everything it can to come up with some kind of solution there, but won't try to come up with solutions for the renewable industry. Hang on. Fuck, not much I can do about it. What is a neutron radiation? It's a form of ionizing radiation often found in nuclear reactors and nuclear bombs. Nuclear detonations releases a huge amount of neutrons, and they've done that for decades and decades. Some of them nuclear weapons, that one there, I think, was the Soviet Union's. It was equal to 3,800 Hiroshima bombs going off at the same time. So if two countries sets off 3,800 nuclear bombs, is that a nuclear war? The nuclear testing was a nuclear war, folks. We've already had multiple nuclear wars. The sun didn't disappear for decades. There was no ice age. There was just the slow, consistent death of all the species in increments. There was the first thing happened was the sex ratio changes worldwide of all the species, more males than females, and then the sterilization immediate following that of very vulnerable species. Now we're looking at an extinction event. Europe's power pain arrives earlier than expected. This story talks about different energies going on in Europe. Europe is headed into a predicted power crunch earlier than expected. Well, it's because of Ukraine and Russia. Worldwide, all the energy issues are because of Ukraine and Russia. All of them. Because all the NATO countries, all the United Nations countries, came out at the same time and said we're not taking anything from Russia. Which meant massive inflation. And so you're not punishing Russia, you're punishing everybody in your countries. And you're destroying the countries. The best way to destroy the countries is cut off the resources to the country. That's what they just done. Due in large part to Russia's invasion of Ukraine and subsequent sanctions could cause vast demand destruction across industries and, consumers like you. European governments in the power sectors have lined up support packages to soften the financial blow. But it won't stop the blow. It'll just soften it for the first couple of weeks. But may need to consider some drastic moves before winter begins. Drastic. To hope the summer would bring a reprieve has not materialized as gas flows dropped and liquefied natural gas cargoes reached their capacities. We expect the next European winter to be a tough time for people and governments. Well, the government's not going to suffer. They're not going to suffer. Zero possibilities. Our updated scenario shows Europe will probably be heading into a storm much earlier than previous thought. You never put no thought into it. You just had sanctions worldwide. And everybody knew immediately. And I put out the video that day saying, well, here comes inflation. And it's way worse than we predicted on top of that. And it's not even started really yet. And the region will be unprepared for the chaos it will bring. This is increasingly a matter of when, not if, the crisis arrives. So the crisis is coming because it's summertime. You don't have to heat your buildings and blah, 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 blah. They're gone crazy. It's just a small group of them too, right? Like the United Nations, they've turned against, and NATO, they're gone to war against the most vulnerable in all their countries themselves. Just 100%, the whole bloody thing is scripted by the World Economic Forums. Coal delivered into Amsterdam is currently trading at $377 a ton. $377 a ton. Up $250 a ton since the beginning of the year. So when the scamdemic started, the coronavirus, coal shot up, right? It was like $60-70 a ton. Now it's $377. It's disgusting what a group of people are doing to the entire planet. It's evil. It's Machiavellian. It's just pure evilness. They're evil by nature. The European nuclear power station not producing at capacities? Yeah, because they're old and brittle. They're high pressure reactors on top of that. So brittle and high pressure reactors don't work together, by the way. So the 7 nuclear plants going to be shutting down in the next while. Germany has 3. They're hoping to extend those 3, but they can't extend the other 4. Germany says they're closing it in the end of December. And so what the industry is going to do is put people in the key positions in Germany and stop that from happening. This is what they do. They're really good at it too. And the people that does this are the most demonic, sadistic people you could ever meet. They're doing it strictly to cause misery to tens of billions of people or tens of millions of people. Strictly about making people's life terrible. That's why they're doing it. That's their thrill. They're serial killers. And nuclear power plants should be labeled as biological weapons of mass destruction. Not maybe, not almost, but they should be because they're always hemorrhaging biological weapons known as isotopes. These are weapons of mass destruction. Despite current supply chain bottlenecks and commodity prices crisis, 13.6 gigawatts of utility-scale solar PV, 15.5 gigawatts of onshore wind capacity should be added to the grid in the next 12 months. That's like 30 nuclear power plants worth of renewable energies in a 12-month period. France, Germany, Spain, Sweden, the United Kingdom will lead the pace of installation, representing 67% of the potential new capacity. Identified 2.4 gigawatts of potential battery storage capacity to be added by the second quarter of 2023. Why the hell would you use batteries? Why do something stupid like that? Why use up your money on batteries, which are disposable, rather than something that can last for 50 years, like compressed air storage, for instance? How can you have a future on this planet? I can't see how we can have a future with the nuclear industry. It's got its despicable disease factory machines everywhere on the planet. The potential new capacities could be increased further if Europe manages to tackle the main barrier to development of renewable energy, namely permitting issues. Getting a permit from the EU is like trying to win the lottery. It's almost impossible. But getting the permits for a nuclear plant, piece of cake. Getting commitments to build reactors that don't even exist on paper, piece of cake. Yep, come on down, we'll stomp it for you right away. Waive off the fee and everything. The European Commission acknowledges the pressing need to address the bottlenecks in the permitting process. Has already released a legislative proposal to facilitate permittings by adopting policies as putting a 1-year cap on the time needed to secure a permit in dedicated areas. Renewables can grow more quickly and support the replacement of the Russian gas in the power mix. You didn't need to cut off Russia to do all of this. It was the worst thing you could do. You needed to do all this, but cutting off your main suppliers, whether you like them or not, has caused inflation that nobody can afford. Only the scum themselves. Only the very wealthy. It's not going to hurt them. It's not going to hurt the politicians. Not going to hurt the fucking militaries. NC critics question Duke's use of gas, nuclear, and hydrogen. In order to build nuclear and hydrogen, hydrogen's a fable, of course, and hydrogen is one of the most intensive things besides nuclear, to replace coal. There's nothing wrong with coal. Don't build them in your cities like idiots, that's all. Why would you do that? Would you have an open fire pit, barbecue, open fire pits in your living room or your bedroom floor? No. Just common sense, right? Environmentalists question Duke's Power's reliance on gas and unproven nuclear and unproven hydrogen technologies. The unproven nuclear is the small modular reactors, and the unproven hydrogen is the pipe dream, right? To stop you coming up from real solutions. The industry is really good at making sure you can't have a future. That's all it's really good at. There's a little bit too much there to read through, unfortunately. But just in case somebody's watching and wants to stop and read it, I'll stick it up there. West Virginia regulators cited a coal company for mining beneath a neighborhood without notifying the residents, resulting in sinkholes and damages to buildings. Does anybody really think they didn't allow that to happen on purpose? Is there anybody out there gullible to think they didn't allow that to happen on purpose so they can demonize coal? In the shadow of the Pilgrim nuclear plant, EPA warning reverberates. In the shadow of the Pilgrim, and which is Holtec got it now, right? Chris Singh is a sadistic pro-nuclear scumbag. The EPA, which is some bizarre death cult, warns firms not to dump the nuclear plant's water into the bay that they've been doing for 60 years already. Because there's a lot of protests, see? To protect irreparable damage that would result from Holtec's plan to dump the wastewater. This is the fuel pool water that didn't boil off. The fuel pools, each fuel pool, there's over 1,000 of them worldwide. Each fuel pool boils off 120,000 liters a day. Each liter is billions or trillions of atoms, because the fuel that's sitting in the pool is still splitting the atoms it would for millions of homes. It gets soaked into the water boils off. So once you take the fuel out of the pool from decommissioning, now the water is left. That's normally boiled off every day, 120,000 liters. So traditionally they just dump that in the ocean because they're the nuclear industry. Who's going to say no to them? But once in a while, someone says no. Someone finds out and says no. This is one of those times. And Holtec plans to dump the water from the decommissioned Pilgrim nuclear plant. It's not decommissioned. The company is looking for its bottom line in the community. Well, people in the community trying to protect the health of the families, the livelihood of the coastal communities, the viability of the fishing industries, and the habitat of the marine life. Fishermen said you can't even throw a gum wrapper off their boat without violating a regulation. Yet Holtec wants to dump 1 million gallons into the ocean of nuclear waste. Yeah, make them store it for 1 million years. Well, Holtec wants to boil it off. If you can't dump it, they just want to boil it and let it evaporate into the community. Because that's what they've been doing for decades. The definition of evil should be a picture of the nuclear industry. Because you can expect the radionuclides to bioaccumulate in everything. The wood, the trees, the grass, sediment, the oysters, the fish, and to be released back into the community through evaporation or sea spray, and ultimately covering the beaches, which has been going on for 60 years. They've been dumping it in the ocean there for 60 years. The fuel pools have been boiling off all day, 120,000 liters for 60 years. It's probably a lot more than that, right? Chris Singh's Holtec plan highlights the fact the government and nuclear industry still have no solution on how to manage nuclear waste and how to protect us from it. This is Diane Turco, the director, Cape Downwinders Hardwich, and we've covered her quite a few times over the years. And recently, in the last few months on this subject in particular. The world's only surviving multilateral nuclear weapons treaty on the verge of collapse. You can't stop it. It's the nuclear industry. Putin has made Ukraine sorry it ever gave up its nuclear weapons. Canada's parliament should speak up. Canada's parliament sat in silence on June the 16th when Canada's nuclear industry lifted all restrictions on food from a nuclear wasteland in Japan, while 55 countries banned it from 14 prefectures, not just Fukushima. So Japan couldn't ship it anywhere but Canada. So Canada's supermarkets were all poisoned permanently since. Everybody in Canada has multiple foods in their homes that is incredibly radioactive from Japan. The explosions of heart problems in liver and lung and respiratory, pituitary, thyroid, adrenaline, Alzheimer's, dementia, autism, diabetes, Down syndrome, 1,800 illnesses over the last 10 years are directly related to the supermarkets being poisoned with Japanese food. The world's only surviving multilateral nuclear weapons treaty, designed to stop the spread of nuclear weapons in poor man's countries, is on the verge of collapse. Is Germany about to decide to keep its nuclear power plants open? Every day since Fukushima nuclear meltdowns, and Germany said they're going to get rid of the nuclear plants, Germany has been demonized every day by every media on the planet. Has multiple kicks at them each year. United States Yellen says any North Korean nuclear test would be a very provocative. Why? Like, you burnt down United Nations, burnt down every community in North Korea. They killed 3 million, wounded over 10 million. That's United Nations. And for almost 70 years, United Nations is land, air, and sea embargoes against a country who didn't attack anybody. And has been used as a boogeyman for 70 years straight. What they done to North Korea is surreal. It's surreal how evil it actually is. What do you think a country's going to do when you isolate them like that? After you bombard them, destroy them, kill millions, injure tens of millions, and then put endless and land, sea, and air embargoes for 7 decades. You burnt down every community in the country. Every community. You burnt it down with napalm, the most cowardly thing you could do. It's a crimes against humanity. It's a war crime. It's a indiscriminate weapon. It's obviously attacking the most vulnerable. That's what United Nations has done. Here we go. IDF, which is Israel, attacking Iran to stop its nuclear program is at the center of Israel's plan. They're not going to do jack shit. They want America to do it. Israel's military chief says the Jewish, now it's the Jew state, has a moral imperative to prepare a military response to Iran's nuclear program. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's a great idea. Go attack Iran. See how that works out for little Israel. Which, by the way, is the 4th biggest producer of miseries, also known as weapons on the planet. We are advancing for the moment of truth. All they do is that they're constantly at war. Israel doesn't stop. Its entire existence is predicated upon wars worldwide using Israelis' weapons. Well, the United States and Israel want to stop Iran from attaining a nuclear weapon. They disagree over how exactly to do it. Joe Biden says during an interview with Israel's media last week that unleashing America's military against Iran is a last resort, and that he is prioritizing diplomacy. You ever heard tell of Patrick Clausen? Let me play a clip for you. I put this pictures and everything in it to help drive the point home. Patrick Clausen. It's hard to see how this president can get us to war with Iran. So it's best if somebody else starts the war. So what he's talking about is it's best if somebody in America attacks America, blames it on Iran to get the population to support a war against Iran. It's called a false flag. And get a load of what he's going to tell you. It's unbelievable.
I frankly think that crisis initiation is really tough. And it's very hard for me to see how the United States president can get us to war with Iran. Some people might think Mr. Wilson wanted to get us into World War I. You may recall he had to wait for the Lusitania episode. Some people might think that Mr. Johnson wanted to send troops to Vietnam. You may recall he had to wait for the Gulf of Tonkin episode. We didn't go to war with Spain until the until the Maine exploded. And may I point out that Mr. Lincoln did not feel he could call out the Federal Army until Fort Sumter was attacked, which is why he ordered the commander at Fort Sumter to do exactly that thing which the South Carolinians had said would cause an attack. Some people might think that Mr. Roosevelt wanted to get us into World War II, as David mentioned. You may recall we had to wait for Pearl Harbor. So if, in fact, the Iranians aren't going to compromise, it would be best if somebody else started the war.
It would be best if somebody else started the war. Yeah, radiation causes obesity. That's right. Japan's obesity doubled in the first couple of years. And they blame it on radiation. It's obesity after a nuclear accident is a marker of radiation brain damage, actual brain damage. So I was supposed to go in for a CAT scan tomorrow to see how bad the cancer is in my kidney, right? And is it all the way down into my bowels? So I delayed that for a month to give the DCA time to work because we have only got a couple of weeks in, right, on the DCA. And the doctor called me, the secretary called me. The doctor's not happy that I done that. He said, I need the CAT scan right away. We need to get this dealt with. I got a real problem. And I said, well, I'm sorry, but I'm not able to do it right now, unfortunately. Now, I'm pounding the DCA. I'm doing 25 milligrams per kilogram body weight, and then half in the morning, half in the evening, and I'm taking vitamin B1 to help absorb it, vitamin C, black tea, caffeine, and potassium to help alleviate also some of the side effects from too much of it, right? Which is basically just numbing. If you stop for a week, you'll be perfectly fine, right? If it happens to you. And then you do that for 2 weeks, and then you stop for a week. So tomorrow I'm going to stop for a week. Because that's what the protocol called for. Meanwhile, Israel Prime Minister says diplomacy won't stop Iran's nuclear program. So it's best if somebody else started the war. It's hard to see how this president gets the war with Iran, so it's best if somebody else starts the war. That's an incredible statement. Now, see, I only showed you a little fraction of that. He goes into details, like a submarine can go down. Blah, 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 blah. There's lots of ways. So this is where we left off last night. Turmeric, there's 1,600 studies was covered in just a single study. Looked at 1,600 other studies on how healthy this stuff is for you. So you can buy the concentrated forms in your supermarkets for like $10 a bottle. It's really good for you. It's good for bad hearts too, right? It's good for a whole lot of things. You can put it on cuts to try to get rid of scars, like fresh cuts, right? Fresh scars, rather. Something that people should think about. Turmeric on the skin can work as fast as in 5 minutes. It's worth noting turmeric supplements tend to be more concentrated than raw turmeric powder. The supplements are more concentrated, right? So they're worth buying. Excessive turmeric may increase heat and dryness in your body. So doses of 500 milligrams taken daily have been found to be effective, basically. You can take more for a while and then cut back your dose, right? Just to get your body... If you take it to support healthy digestion, they suggest taking it with food. To promote joint comfort and mobility, taking your supplements either after the meal or on an empty stomach. Promotes anti-inflammatory, good bacteria growth for optimal gut health, lifting your spirits with mood support and strengthening your skeleton system. It's a super good food, and as a supplement, it's super important. Radionuclide transfer to wildlife at reference sites in the Chornobyl exclusion zone, and the resultant radiation exposure. They closed 9,000 farms in Ireland and Scotland and the United Kingdom after Chernobyl, which was 7 and 9 tons was evaporated. Fukushima was multiple 720-ton reactors evaporated into the environment. So imagine how bad Chernobyl or Fukushima actually is. A study addresses significant data deficiency in developing the environmental protection framework for the International Commission on Radiation Protection, which is United Nations. They got, like 500 subsidy companies. Namely, a lack of radionuclide transfer data for some of the reference animals and plants. It's the first study that has sampled much of a wide range of species, invertebrates, plants, amphibians, small mammals, from a single site in Chernobyl exclusion zone. You'd be surprised what's been omitted in the studies, and studies they didn't do. And it's always the same. They don't study humans. If you do, they don't release it publicly. We have done whole shows, actually, over on human studies. It's disgusting what they've done. Chernobyl is one of those. We report radionuclides, 137 cesium, 90 strontium, 241 americium, and plutonium isotopes. Which is 238, 239, 240, 241s. In wildlife soil samples, use them to determine whole organisms' soil concentrations ratio and absorbed dose rates. Like, whatever their number is going to be, you got to multiply it by several thousand. Editorial, learning from nuclear plants, Seabrook's false alarm. There's a whole lot of stories showed up on this to downplay it. There was too many. It's a nightmare scenario, thousands of summer vacationers, and Chamber of Commerce. People forget how important or how powerful that organization is. They really are. Like every business in the community, you got to throw money at them each year, or to get left out of the phone books and everything else. Would rather not contemplate, but that potentially really hit home for those New Hampshire seacoast earlier this week. Emergency alarm inadvertently triggered, they claimed. During routine systems testings briefly sowed panic and confusion before authorities assuaged everyone's worst fears. The false alarm forced beaches in Rye, Hampton, and Seabrook to temporarily close. There shouldn't be a beach at the nuclear power plant. It's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. Parents should be arrested for child abuse when they take their children to that beach. The nuclear facility, with its domed containment structure, looms over the area, situated beyond the marsh, just a short distance from the summer's resorts. These are not resorts you want to go to, folks. Densely populated beach community. These are not beaches you want to be on. You want nothing to do with the nuclear power plants. These are disease factories. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, decade after decade. These are disease factories. Seabrook town manager, said that his office is usually notified of any testing. But he said that it didn't happen in this instant. Again, that's certainly when you compound everything, right? That the alarms went off, the speakers told people to leave, it wasn't pre-recorded, it was somebody in real time, was obviously really nervous, had a very broken voice, was stuttering. That EPA and the rest of them didn't know about it for about 40 minutes before anybody come out and said, oh, it's a false alarm. The sirens going off. There was a whole lot of things. And they didn't notify the town manager, who you've got to absolutely unequivocally notify when you're going to have an emergency, testing rather. You've got to notify him. And he didn't do it because it really happens, see? Just compounded the fallout, no pun intended, I suppose, from this preventable non-emergency. Notice the way they continuously say that, try to put those connotations in there that it was a false alarm, non-emergency. Families who had vacationed for generations in the nuclear wasteland, used to the occasional heads up of a system test, but not this time. Managers weren't warned, the local population wasn't warned, when that's the protocol. You don't have a test, right? So 100% they had a major radiological release. And then you had that scumbag NGO coming out telling people to shut up and stop complaining. The nuclear plants, and we played that clip from Twitter, nuclear plants emergency announcement told people in the area to turn on their local radio stations. So, of course, I turned on the radio like everybody else did, but there was nothing on any of the radio stations, nothing on the emergency broadcasting system, right? Because that would have happened immediately if it was a testing, see? Right? Everybody would have been on the ball if it had been a test. It wasn't. The dirty scum, just incredible scumbags. A representative for Next Era Energy tried to lay the disruption in people's lives caused by its mistake. Seabrook Station is currently operating with no issues that impact the surrounding or the nearby communities. They're such pompous fucks. As anyone who's frequent Seabrook's beach knows, Route 288 provides the only direct way in and out of the community. And that monumental traffic jams on the stretch can happen any weekend through Labor Day. So if they have an accident, you can't evacuate the people in time. Close it down and arrest everybody that covered up this major release they've had there. The area approximately 10 miles around Seabrook Station has been designated as an emergency planning zone. Why would you live in that zone for? Oh, it'll never happen. Really? It never stops happening. These places are always hemorrhaging radiation. These are disease factories. They have 121 sirens and loudspeakers in a 10-mile radius. 121. 121. See, the 10-mile emergency planning zone should be a no-go zone. You shouldn't be allowed to live there, play there. And they put all these disease factories right in prime places, prime real estate all the time. Is this Taiwan? I think KMT, that's Taiwan. And DPP butt heads over nuclear phase out. Taiwan had 2,000 nuclear students, university students, nuclear engineering, nuclear students, spammed the internet for several years after Fukushima melted down, starting immediately. The students' job was to go online and tell people it was like a banana, that it was like a potato chip, it was like walking in sunshine, it was like getting on an airplane or climbing a mountain or sleeping next to somebody or eating peanut butter. You got any idea how disgusting that is? How despicable it is that nuclear university students done something like that for several years straight every day. Any concept of how evil you got to be to do that in the first place, but to have 2,000 nuclear students. We covered it a few years ago. It came out in the Taiwanese media. I got it somewhere in the archives. I can't find it, but I used to bring it up all the time back when it first came out. It's a stunning revelation. It just shows you this complete disconnect of conscience, of morals. There's a complete disconnect in the nuclear industry. They couldn't give a shit about you. They don't even care about themselves. Ma, a member of the opposition KM, which is known as KMT political party, served 2 terms as president between 2008 and 2016, told an energy conference hosted by the 2-party affiliated think tanks, they're telling the governments what to do now, that increasing support internationally for nuclear power were grounds for DPP abandoning plans to phase out Taiwan's 3 remaining plants by 2025. The former president cited the EU reclassification of nuclear alongside of natural gas as a green fuel. Yeah, but Taiwan's not part of the EU. Because the EU done it now, and we hear this coming from all over the world in the last week or so, less than a week. Well, yeah, a little over a week since the EU classified dirty nuclear as green technology. And, of course, Austria and Germany are going to launch a lawsuit against them for doing it. They just barely passed, which is, it shows you, in order to get over 50% of the people to vote for nuclear, shows that the entire EU is compromised. On a real bad way. That the nuclear industry is infiltrated on such a high level that you have no control over your destiny. You can't call nuclear green or sustainable. It's absurd. But they're using that false precedence as evidence that it has a legitimate role to play in meeting Taiwan's 2050 net zero emission. Every time I hear the word net zero, I want to go punch Miles Allen in the fucking mouth. Excuse the language. He wrote a stupid fucking paper and now everybody's paying for it with their lives worldwide. Asked to respond to Shithead's comment, the Ministry of Economic Affairs said that Shithead provided an incomplete picture that belied a misunderstanding of the EU's position. So if everybody jumps off the cliff, are you going to jump off the fucking cliff too, Ma? The EU has attached strict conditions to development of the scumbag nuclear energy. No, they didn't. They said, will you agree to find a solution for the waste by 2050? And the company said, yeah, okay, well, you're agreeing. We've been waiting 80 years for them to come up with a solution. They haven't even tried. And you think they're going to do it in the next couple of years, couple of decades? You're a lunatic. It's 100% railroaded. It's just, it was evil to do it when there was no need to. Because between 2020 and 2026, they estimated, the energy agencies estimate, there'll be 4,800 gigawatts of renewable energy online in just that 6-year period. Last year was 333 nuclear power plants where the renewables in a 12-month period came online. Nuclear can't build 333 nuclear power plants in a single year. And at incredibly low cost compared to nuclear. And so 4,800 gigawatts is equal to 5,500 large reactors online in less than 6 years. And that's without the push. Imagine if countries pushed it. Then you wouldn't have issues now, would we? Taiwan's got 20% renewable energy online by 2025. Six percent of renewables in 2021. And in 2016, it was 4.8% for renewables. So they're not trying very hard, are they? Like Taiwan has a place called Orchard Island. Just to give you an idea how batshit crazy the nuclear industry down there actually is. Orchard Island is where they stuck the natives. They kicked them out of the best spots. And put them on this really nice island. And then he said to him, you know, we like to put a salmon canning, tuna canning factory on some of your land. And the natives said, hey, that's a great idea. We're going to get a few kickbacks. Said, oh, yeah, you get some kickbacks. So they built a nuclear waste site and called it a canning factory. Try wrapping your mind around that. That's what Taiwan done. Told the natives it was going to be a canning factory on their special land, and they built a nuclear waste site there. And they put all of Taiwan's nuclear waste. There's evil, and then there's Taiwan, man. Taiwan gets the gold medal for evil. For the kind of, that's evil. No, that's not a nuke. Don't listen to Dana. That's not a nuclear waste site. It's a canning factory. Taiwan, man. Nuclear plant owner says false alarm happened during testing, but it was testing without any of the normal attributes. None. The state regulatory agencies weren't aware. The nuclear regulatory agency wasn't aware. The townships weren't aware. Fire departments, first responders weren't aware. Nobody was aware. There was no pre-recorded message. It was a guy nervous as shit stuttering on the speakers. It was a release. They had a major release there. There's their fuck up sirens. U.S. Senator Jean Shaheen of New Hampshire is requesting a fuel review of what caused emergency alarm to be falsely activated at the Seabrook Nuclear Power Station earlier this week after what she called a breakdown in communication. A breakdown in communication transpired between the plant, the state, and the local officials. It's the only siren testing that had these attributes. It's the only time. Because they actually had a release. Construction began on it in 1976. And the disease factory started up on August 19th, 1990. Takes forever. $17 billion for the big disease factory to poison everybody. Seabrook Nuclear Station. The State Homeland Security Emergency Management Agency's Next Era Energy put out statements Tuesday saying the alarm was false more than 30 minutes after beachgoers heard the announcement. Vladimir Putin using Europe's largest nuclear plants as weapons. It's just a coward thing to do, right? Because you can't fire back at them because they're at a nuclear power plant. 500 Russian soldiers controlling a nuclear plant firing weapons from the nuclear plant site so you can't fire back at them. If you cut the power supply off to the plant melts down on top of that. They're insane. I say they're going to have a meltdown in Ukraine before the year's out. Ukraine officials said the scumbag, degenerate International Atomic Energy Agency is failing to put enough pressure on shit for brains Russia. It never stops around here, does it? This fallout, New Vegas mod immediately nukes the NCR soldiers who say they want the nuclear winter. So the video games is absurd. With nuclear weapons and nuclear winter. Well, how do you kill the soldiers? Well, you blow up a nuclear weapon and get the nuclear winter, rather. So the nuclear winter theory was written by three guys. I actually covered it again last week. So these three guys wrote a paper in 86 that a nuclear war would cause a nuclear winter. And they were saying as little as 500 nuclear weapons the size of Hiroshima, which, like the Castle Bravo nuclear weapon was 1,000 Hiroshimas. It was double what they predicted would cause a nuclear winter. The ocean creates tens of thousands of miles of rain every single day. Every single day. Nuclear war or not, it's still going to do that. That rain, that moisture, and there's an ocean up above us, by the way, that falls out, and it catches a lot of radiation and particulates, and it brings it down to Earth. That's that system. It's existed long before the human experience. And so even if we did have an event where we could trigger the sun being blocked out from all the nuclear fires, which is absurd because we've had forest fires that dwarfs what a nuclear war could do. The New Vegas mod recently shared to Nexus mods makes it possible to shut the soldiers up for good. Next time they're wishing for a nuclear winter, that's exactly what they'll get. A nuke will appear out of nowhere, destroying them and anything else in the vicinity. Yay, the stupid games, eh? Tetraquarks and pentaquarks and dozy daisy. Unnatural forms of exotic matter have been found. So they'll spend $1 trillion looking for these particles that have no benefit whatsoever. But they won't come up with solutions for wind and solar storage, despite the fact that solutions exist and are easy to implement and can be quickly implemented in just several months. Because all you got to do is dig tunnels, seal it all, and compress air down there, rather than pumped hydro, right? Scientists have found 3 new... These are not scientists, these are inbreeds. Inbreeds have found 3 new examples of a very exotic form of matter made of quarks that can yield insight into early universe. They know more about the universe than they do about what to do with nuclear waste. They don't study what to do with nuclear waste, but they burn just worldwide, I don't know what the numbers are, hundreds of billions of dollars a year looking up into space. Rather than coming up, all these incredibly articulated, smart people, they should be sent to Fukushima and places like that. Right to Los Alamos and to Hanford to come up with solutions for the disease factories they created down there. And then CERN got something like 28,000 scientists that are making a fortune each on top of that. Announced discovery exotic matter not seen in nature. 2 different tetraquarks and pentaquarks, all of which were created inside a collision between particles of protons slamming together at speeds very close to the speed of light. Well, the radioactive fallout, that's what it pulses energy almost at the speed of light. When they hit each other, they don't mesh together. They change directions, a braking effect, and creates, it's well known, and it creates like these X-rays that will sterilize all the insects and plants and animals in the forest and everything else. Hiroshima and Nagasaki annual commemorative candle float in Salisbury. They collect all the candles at the end of the river. It's just a little area. The Hiroshima and Nagasaki commemorative candle float will return to the river Avon, Alpha Victor Oscar, November next month to commemorate the thousands of people who lost their lives due to nuclear weapons. Well, what about the people who lost their lives due to the nuclear fallout from the nuclear weapons? Don't forget them next time, okay? The stage in the event, which will take place on August 8th on the bridge by the clock tower in Salisbury, the campaign for nuclear disarmament should be a campaign for nuclear power plant shutdowns. Because that's your threat. They're not going to use the nuclear weapons, and there's a shitload of these organizations that have been dubbed into thinking that they need to fight the nuclear weapons. No, you got to fight the destructive disease factories known as nuclear power plants. Nuclear power plants are your enemies. How's our poll doing tonight, anyway? Should disease factories, known as nuclear power plants, be labeled as biological weapons of mass destruction? We got 43 votes, 98%. We got 37 likes and 27 people on the show. Bless your hearts. And somebody actually voted no. That happens. No, like, I shouldn't make fun of people that votes no. Because just people get confused by the subject, right? And then the questions are the master class. These polls are your master class, right? And so over a short period of time, these polls will teach you, no matter how gullible or naive or unaware of the subject you are, the polls will actually teach you right from wrong. Well, that's the theory, right? So, like, what I'm doing here is desperation. These shows are desperation to educate enough people to fight back against the industry. That's the idea of these shows is, because I got a huge personality is probably one of the problems, but that comes with the territory, right? I can't talk like a zombie, and so my personality is what ends up front and center, right? But I can't be a zombie and just read the news and be a zombie, because these kind of stories, you need emotions to really appreciate the significance of each and every story. Shows you how wicked the industry actually is, how it's captured all of your regulatory agencies, it's captured all your universities, it's captured all your gutless, soulless medias a long time ago, and it done it in increments, and it was very effective. This year, the candle float will be joined by lanterns sent from Hiroshima, which were painted by Japanese school children. Bless their hearts. They were poisoned by Fukushima on top of that. So the candle float should be for Fukushima food. Stop the Fukushima food genocide. They're shipping it everywhere, particularly Canada. But it's meant to remember the victims of the nuclear weapons testing, and so they should be remembered. These people were hit with 1,000 plus mile per hour winds. Some of these people were ejected 400 and 500 feet into the air, and their horses and pets. It was a horrible way to die. And I'm glad they're doing that. Bless their hearts. UK is facing phone blackouts and nuclear shutdowns as the African hairdryer heat waves descends. The UK is expected to get 41 degrees. This is the hottest they've ever seen it there. I'm not laughing. It's just the nuclear industry is disgusting. 500-mile wide African hairdryer. The wind is like a hairdryer, going to blow that country dry as a bone. It's going to be a couple of thousand senior citizens. And dying of heat is a brutal way to die. The UK faces an extreme temperatures immediately that they've never experienced before. Extreme heat plan. Your journey, carry water. I was out today. I got some videos coming up in about 3 or 4 minutes. Because yesterday I shot a video and it was so crappy I just made it unlisted because it wasn't watchable. So I went back out today with the rig. And, I'll get to it in a few minutes here. Something else. Seen 3 birds. That was pretty cool. This winter we seen, I think it was 14 birds. And I don't know, I must have went out there 40 times. So we've seen a total of 14 birds the winter. Nuclear reactors can trip out, which means there's not much life out there, is it? Nuclear reactors can trip out above 40 degrees Celsius. We've had lots of headlines where nuclear is the only thing that's reliable in heat waves. But actually they're not, right? Because the rivers are too hot for them to run. And then they'll trip out at plus 40 degrees. They'll trip out at 75 mile per hour winds on top of that. Old bangers were told to stay off the roads, old cars. The IAEA said not to risk a beach trip in an old vehicle, as cars over 10 years are more likely to break down in the heat wave. Britain's hottest temperature ever recorded is 38.7 degrees on July 25th, 2019. These are due to Fukushima, these heat waves. Oh yeah, the passing of the co-founder Michael Crepon, the co-founder of the Stimson Center, a tireless advocate for international peace and security, passed away the weekend at his home in Charlottesville, Virginia. Our heart goes out to the loved ones. Michael was an internationally renowned leader in the fight to prevent nuclear war. It's too bad he didn't turn against nuclear power plants. And now if you turn against nuclear power plants, the problem was he had good intentions, but he got taken over by the industry really quick. I'll show you. Dedicating himself to protecting humankind from our worst impulses, he was an early influential post-Cold War advocate for the complete elimination of nuclear weapons. With co-founder Barry Bleachman, he played essential roles in the creation of the Open Skies Treaty, the Permanent Extension Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and the ratification of the Chemical Weapons Convention. And he was the author of 23 books, most recently Winning and Losing the Nuclear Pence, and the Rise and Demise and Revival of Arms Control, and countless papers and essays. So if you go over to the site, you start seeing stuff like this. The board of directors. Imagine if I had a board of directors like that. And they got people from all kinds of groups. Georgetown University, Columbia University. They got Bechtel. I don't know. I don't recognize any of them. That don't mean that. But they got a big crew on the board of directors. My goodness. Yeah? Isn't that something? And so who funds that? All of his books are funding all of these goblins, I guess. Those who wish to support the Stimson Center in honor of his legacy, support what? All of these people. Pay their wages. Cambridge RKVST shows future nuclear waste tracking in Sellafield. In Sellafield. Is that some kind of sick joke? It's called Zero Trust. Zero Trust. And Sellafield. I apologize, didn't mean to blow up laughing. Woo! Okay, so I guess video time is it. Sellafield Limited, the UK's largest nuclear decommissioning site. What are you talking about? They're not decommissioning anything. They got pools there that are 50 years old, full of fuel rods. They don't even know what's in it because they didn't leave records. The place is surrounded by farms as far as you can see on top of that. Right up to the gates. Shipping food, radioactive food out for 70 years. They had a meltdown in 1957, for goodness sake, with a mixed oxide fuel facility, for goodness sakes. This is the day. So I had the vest on with the articulating arm. And then I had the gimbal mounted in a cup that I had zap strapped onto that. And then I had the drone in the air. I had the drone in the air. Sorry, stuttered for a second. It'll pick up. So I'm trying to control the drone, and the big gimbal. You can see it. Let me start that clip again. You see up in the top left-hand corner, you can see the drone falling down through the trees. I'll play that again, hopefully. I wasn't paying. It was a good thing I looked at the last second because I was able to spot it. Here it is shredding the tree. Man, it took a while to find that sucker, eh? It was hung up in the tree. I was down looking on the ground for it. The drone has gone into the trees. I'll never get it now. I got lots of spare props. So in those trees somewhere. Let's go get it, I suppose. So we're using the big camera. Because yesterday didn't work out too good. A few birds. I seen 3 birds. I seen one earlier. So 4 birds. I seen one earlier. I'm right alongside of town though, so it doesn't really count. Cruise along, hope for the best. I'm out practicing. We got all the equipment, right? You got those little white millers. Those colors don't look great. It looks okay. So we're looking for birds, looking for bees, looking for wasps, looking for ants' nest. I tore an ant's nest apart yesterday, and there was no ants in it. It was really, really dry. It was incredibly dry. And it shouldn't be. You got little millers, little white ones today. Got a lot of flowers on the side of the road. Lots of flowers on the side of the road. I'm trying to adjust the color, but I'm having a few issues. Let's try it right there. And so that's a little bit better. That's pretty good footage. But it's really hard to work it. You can only drive with one hand. So you can only drive with one hand. And then your other hand has to control the thumb. Has to hold the camera steady and use the thumb controller to direct the camera. I'll try again tomorrow. But this was a brutal amount of work to get this far. So I'll change things tomorrow. I've seen a bird. Yeah, this is where I've seen 3 birds. Here he goes. He's to our left. 1, 2, 3. Wow. They shot across the road. 2 miles away, less than 2 miles from the town. But that's pretty cool. There's 3 little birds. That's all 3 of them have gone to our right. Awesome. So by moving the camera up, I can get rid of most of the engine noise, you see? I didn't know that. So you can't see anything with driving fast, so you gotta take your time.
See them white willows?
The buttercup,
White millers.
you get the buttercup plants inside the road.
Lots of little buttercup flowers alongside the road.
No bees, no wasp.
I'm hoping that the color I'm seeing is not going to be the final color.
Because yesterday's video was a
I
disaster.
don't know what's going on, but
And so today I went for it, which is good. So I had to do some adjustments. Normally I'm moving again. A couple little millers. There was no spider webs whatsoever, and I checked a number of places. For spider webs. We did see these little. I'll turn that down. We did see these little white, what I call millers. They're like tiny moths. I should look it up to find out exactly what they are. But I was seeing them on sting nettles. They were hanging out on sting nettles. In a couple of different places. That's where I was finding them. But there was some on this trail. There's not many people uses these trails. It's really difficult to get actually on the trail itself. And trail's grown over pretty good, but there is some traffic along it. It's grown over pretty good for most places. And I was trying to get the kinks out of the equipment. Now I got a shoulder because I got the full vest on with an articulating arm that goes in multiple directions with the spring loaded and has counterweights on it. And you're supposed to mount the camera on top of it. But the idea was to try to mount the gimbal on this to try to get nice, clean, steady footage. And so the footage is pretty steady. I succeeded in that. The drone was supposed to fly ahead of me because you have a tracking mode, but it was too complicated. So tomorrow I'm going to try a different setup. Now, last year I was halfway across the province camping in the woods looking for spiders. And today it's windy, so you would expect to see the spider webs standing out. Because normally you would check the spider webs to see what insects are in the area, right? They're gone. There is none. It's surreal. There's no spiders in the forest anymore. And last year we were specifically looking for spiders and, of course, the other species, birds and bees and stuff like that. And it was almost a total zero. There was no migrant. Well, no. Last year we found 2 ducks in around 400 freshwater ponds we looked at, and they both had baby ducklings. And the year before there was no ducks in the ponds, and it was the same 400 plus ponds, right? And there's no fish jumping in the ponds too. I'm still waiting for the wheel bearing to show up, and that might not be until the end of the month before that even shows up. And so I can't use the boat. I can't take a chance and tow the trailer with the quad on it somewhere. It's torture. And it's so tempting just to say, frig it, I'm going to go do it. But what happens if it breaks down? I can't afford to get out of there, right? And we got the stickers showed up for the trailers, the boat trailer, and the truck for the licensing for another year. So that's already done. And we got the stickers showed up 2 days ago. And that's a huge relief. That's a massive relief, actually. And so going out there today, I was just trying. I'm hanging on with one hand. I'm holding the gimbal and everything with the other hand. And anybody ever drove a quad should understand how freaking hard it is to do that. And then I was trying to fly the drone, and I flew it into the trees. I got tons of extra blades, so I changed out the ones I destroyed. And how's the poll doing? We're going to close down the poll, I guess. It hit a 50. That's so awesome. Should nuclear power plants be labeled as biological weapons of mass destruction? The right answer is yes, and we got 50 votes on it. We got 42 votes. Last night we never got very many thumbs up. I noticed again last night. Total of 48 votes last night. That's surreal. That small amount. And then that video yesterday, I made that unlisted because it was such bad quality. It was live streaming with my cell phone. Normally it's okay, right? But 78, 66, 57. So to only get 48 after the whole day on my video last night, this is pretty strange. So we're going to end the poll. Should nuclear power plants be labeled as biological weapons of mass destruction? I got a nice, awesome 50 votes on that. And that's the end of the show, I guess, at this stage. We never seen anything else after those 3 birds. There's nothing after those 3 birds. There's no bees, and there's tons of the buttercup flowers and yellow flowers, bright flowers. But never seen no bees. Dana Nasana, good night, Dana. Thank you again. Victor, plenty of spiders there, birds, bugs, which is good, yeah. Where you to? Snakes and doggies. Port Angeles. Good night, everybody. God bless everybody. Hugs for everybody. Thinker. Mindy, Patriot, Animal, Angel. Animal, I'm sorry, Mindy. Fire ants, bees, grasshoppers, hornworms, and wasps are all in their backyard and the garden. That's good to hear. We ain't got them here, that's for sure. They're not out in British Columbia either, that's for sure. Dana Nasana says he got one bumblebee that sticks out like a sore thumb. Thinker, Andrew B. Hi, Andrew. Which is CFINSTR. Chelsea. Hi, Chelsea. Hope everybody's doing good. Obsolete Optics. Hellos. Kevin Blanche. Hi, Kevin. Kevin, not feeling good by the sounds of it. Probably the heat. Michael Allport. I'm doing the best I can, folks. I work like a dog all day, every day. I got 0 quitting to me, if anybody wasn't aware of that. You have to appreciate it. I'm dedicated. Doing these shows each night there's nothing easy about what I'm doing. On top of that, getting out in the woods is important though, so I'm doing that. And so that's twice the amount of work each day for me. And Stephen Gadd, Gadd. Haven't seen Stephen Young in the last couple of weeks. I hope he's doing okay, man. Another Gmail. John Shiflett. Hi, John. The Invisible Rabbit. Philip Wan. I know I've seen James Lucid in there. Even though I don't see his comments right now. That's kind of weird because I've seen him there. I know Colette's out there somewhere. Hi, Colette. No, Swanee D. Peaceware. V3N. V3NOMOUSVIX3N. Yeah, hi. There's James Lucid. Hi, James. Just double checking everybody. Adam the Mushroom. Chad. Anybody I missed, my apologies. If you made it this far, don't forget to give us a thumbs up. Yeah, you're welcome, Dana. Thank you. Good night. Mindy. Good night, Mindy. Obsolete. Where's Shayla? Well, that looks about it to me. We're 2 hours in. 2 hours and 15 minutes into the show. I see the my Geiger counter batteries only last a little over 2 hours and 10 minutes. So when that dies, it usually means it's over 2 hours and 10 minutes typically, right? That old camera battery, we've been using that for like 5 years or something, 5 days a week. And we took a couple 100,000 pictures with that camera too. The only thing works on it now is the video kind of works on it, but the picture doesn't work. It'll freeze open. And I have a fixed lens on it that I used for the Geiger counter. And so it's still a beautiful picture on it, but it's either send it away and get it fixed or just keep going like we are, which is probably, who knows how much it's going to cost to get those things fixed, right? Should be fixed because that's an expensive camera. That was $1,200, I think we paid for that. And then we paid $1,300 for the lenses, 2 lenses. This is a micro 4/3 lens, right? Which reminds me, we got to get a micro 4/3 adapter for my Sony to use these other lenses on it. Because I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 micro 4/3 lenses that I can't use only on the one camera. And that's not, camera doesn't work proper, right? My big camera is micro 4/3, and I use fixed lenses on that with no motors. It doesn't fade in and out of focus that way, right? Yeah, looks like I got everybody. Anybody I missed, my apologies. See everybody tomorrow night for Tuesday's show. And we got through the news we didn't cover last night tonight, so that was cool. And tomorrow, I think it's supposed to rain here tomorrow, so I probably won't be in the woods. But God bless, hugs for everybody. You'd have a great night. Hugs for everybody that's watching this later. Everybody's chatting. Get extra hugs. Those that are just sitting back, hello for you folks too. We'll see everybody on tomorrow night. We got a lot of news for tomorrow night to get through. And so we had to slug it out tonight. It'll be a bit better tomorrow night. We had to catch up tonight, right? Thanks, Tinker. See everybody tomorrow. Take care, folks. Have a great night and a great day tomorrow. Take care.